a watchman at some point in their lives? This is the person that comes up to you and tells you you shouldn't be doing something that you're doing. And it's usually somebody you don't like telling you to stop doing something you like doing, and you just don't like that. We generally don't like watchmen of any kind. Now, the terminology doesn't always work, but if we understand what a watchman is, we'll begin to get a sense of what we're talking. We're talking about the guy who's got the uniform on. Maybe he even has a little badge of some sort. Maybe he has one of those black belts with utility things all around it. And in some cases, he even carries a gun. Now, that's scary because some of these guys aren't really with it enough to carry guns, in our opinions, are they? But we're not just talking about security officers. We're talking about people that have that responsibility and personality come up to you and tell you you need to stop doing what you're doing because you're wrong. But we don't like those. That's just the way it is. But God says to Ezekiel, I have made you my watchman. My watchman. There's a lot of Christians that think that they're God's watchmen, but then they go about it as if they're doing it for themselves rather than for God. I feel good because I'm more righteous than you. That seems to be what the Pharisees were during Christ's time. The Pharisees thought, well, we're doing it right and you're doing it wrong, so we're better than you and we're going to tell you so. That's a watchman of a sort, but it's the wrong kind, isn't it? We're going to go through some of this, though, as we go through. But remember, you don't like a watchman. Remember that as you go through this, because you may forget when we get through. All right? Remember, you do not like watchmen. Nobody likes a watchman, actually. It's really something very common. They're always sticking their noses into other people's business, right? But they're there for a reason, aren't they? There's a legitimate reason. We complain about going to the airport and going through the TSA stuff all the time, but we're kind of glad we do. Because we don't want somebody lighting a shoelace on fire in the middle of an airplane flight or whatever else it may be that goes wrong. We don't want terrorists on those flights, so we want that watchman there, don't we? And by the way, our TSA people do not look like that. I just wanted to make sure we understood that. Now, I don't want anyone sticking their noses into my business, do you? I really don't. I mean, after all, I'm an American, I can do whatever I want to, can't I? Well, kind of. We kind of get that mentality, though, of thinking that you can't tell me no, period. It's like a 2-year-old, isn't it? We respond that way sometimes. However, there's an important role of a watchman, and God defines that in Ezekiel chapter 33, as well as chapter 37. This watchman, of course, is blowing, you guys see that? That's a shofar. You ever heard the name shofar before? Some of you have? Yeah. That's a ram's horn. When they say they blew trumpets during the time of David and Solomon, chances were they didn't have 3 little keys and they weren't Louis Armstrong looking, puff-cheeked out trumpet players. They were blowing one of these things. It's a ram's horn, a shofar. And it was used to call out the army. It was used to give warning. It was used to call out across distances, but it was used as watchmen of God. What if God put the watchman there for my benefit? Nah, that's not possible, is it? We don't think so. But what if they're there to warn me? That's essentially what a watchman's job is, isn't it? Now, we've got a cute little commercial on TV, and they say, well, aren't you going to stop him? He says, no, I'm just a monitor. I don't do anything about it. You know the commercial I'm talking about. It's really cute, but that's kind of the way we think sometimes. My job's not to do anything about the problem. My job is just to warn you that there is a problem. Oh, by the way, there is a problem. Yeah, thanks. That really helps a lot. Judy's over here. Judy, did Tom get his malware fixed on his computer? Okay, good. He had a computer problem earlier this week and warned me. He acted like a watchman, warning me that the little thumb drive he gave me with some files on it should not be used because he had gotten a virus on his computer of some sort. Now, that's good. That's powerful stuff. He helped me to warn me as I needed to be warned at that particular point in time. Now, in this case, though, God's watchman is to warn us. He's also to save us. Genesis chapter 4, a very interesting incident occurs. We know this one. Lord said to Cain, where is Abel, your brother? And he says, I don't know. That's a paraphrase in modern English, by the way. I don't know. I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? Everybody knows this passage, don't we? And we think, how stupid could Cain be to say this to God? But actually, that's the way we live mostly, isn't it? Am I my brother's keeper? It's a phrase that we know the question, and it's stated in such a way as to be like a rhetorical question, isn't it? It's a hedge, by the way, when we talk about a keeper. You guys were supporting a missionary in Tanzania, Africa, East Africa. They use hedges in the villages and some of that parts of the region. They're hedges of thorns and bushes to keep the wild animals out while they're sleeping at night, protecting them. That's what the hedge is he's talking about here. It is designed to protect. Keeper means to protect, to guard, or to attend to. Am I my brother's guard? Am I my brother's protector? Could be a very good way of defining that and translating it as well. Am I supposed to be protecting my brother? God didn't ask him that, did he? He says, where's your brother? He kind of overreacted, didn't he? Why? Because he was guilty, wasn't he? Now, we can see that, and we know that, but as a result of that, we forget what he's actually saying sometimes. He's supposed to be a watchman for his brother, is what he's at. Am I supposed to keep watch over my brother? Well, it would have been probably good to do so, but no. We'll throw this out on the table just like it means something. It's a rhetorical question, am I? And of course, the obvious answer is no. Obvious to whom, by the way? Cain, right? It wasn't obvious to God, but Cain thought that that was an obvious answer. I need to keep my nose clean, and I need to keep it out of your business, don't I? How many times have you heard Christians say that about themselves? It's not my place to stick my nose into their business. And then maybe they'll pass the buck. That's the elder's job. Or that's the preacher's job. Or you name it, whatever it would have been. But it's our job sometimes too. Let's go to Ezekiel 33. You, son of man, I have made a watchman for the house of Israel. We're going to get back to Ezekiel and explain who he is in just a moment, but he's being made a watchman. He says, whenever you hear a word from my mouth, whenever you hear a word from my mouth, you shall give them warning from me. You will give them warning from me. When I was a young preacher, I was being taught this all the time. We went through school. They would remind us of this passage in class periodically. They'd say, you know, your job is supposed to be a watchman. You're supposed to warn the people. It's kind of hard to keep that in mind when you're a young preacher and preaching and working and doing all the other things we got to do. But that's exactly what we're supposed to do, isn't it? How about this one? Oh, you can hardly even see that, can you? Can you see that? You got a watchman right here, sleeping in his chair. He's got a poster in front of him, a watchman that makes it look like he's a real big, mean, tough guy, yeah. A watchman's supposed to give warning, isn't he? Is this watchman going to give much warning? Not much warning at all, is he? All right, here's the Ezekiel passage again. But he lived in a dark time. In the space of less than 20 years, there were 3 populations of Israelites that were taken out or exiled from the promised land. They were away from Jerusalem, away from the temple, and presumably away from God himself. Ezekiel, however, was going to become their watchman in their new place. Now, if you know the history of this time period, this is the Babylonian captivity. This is where Nebuchadnezzar's army had come in, destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple. They literally had burned the temple. Jeremiah, who had been God's watchman in Israel before it happened, sat on the Mount of Olives the next day, overlooking the devastation of his beautiful city and his beautiful temple, the smoke rising from the ruins, and he wrote the book of Lamentations. Lamentations means what? Oh, come on. What does lamentation mean? You guys haven't watched Conan movies, have you? The lamentation of the women. That's what a soldier is supposed to be, right? Well, he was lamenting over the loss of Jerusalem. And he called it, we call it Lamentations anyways. He cried, he wrote this beautiful poem about the loss of Jerusalem. Ezekiel's going to be the Lord's watchman to the children of Israel in Babylon. We're going to get to that in just a minute. You see, the Babylonians weren't satisfied with just destroying Jerusalem. They wouldn't dare touch the temple, would they? Well, actually, they did, didn't they? They not only touched the temple, but they destroyed it. They knocked it into pieces. They destroyed it completely. They broke it into rubble, these beautiful, massive stones. And they burned it and left it nothing but a smoking pile of ruins. That's what this moment in time came out of. Even the king himself, Jehoiakim, was in exile. You guys even remember the name of Jehoiakim? You should. But pay attention. He was the king when Babylon came in and destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple. Does that make him a good king or a bad king? That in and of itself doesn't mean anything, does it? But the fact he was a king and didn't stop it indicates that he was probably what? A bad king. He didn't lead the people in righteousness, but rather led them in their iniquity. All right, Ezekiel was supposed to be a priest. He was supposed to be a priest where? At the temple in Jerusalem. Could he be a priest in Jerusalem? No, he was in Babylonia, wasn't he? He was far from Jerusalem and far from the temple. In the midst of all the trouble, God wanted a man to watch for and to give warning to his people. Even though they had just gone through the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, the capture and exile of all the people from that land, he wanted someone to warn them while they were in captivity. Jeremiah was God's watchman in Israel or in Judah before the exile. You remember what they called Jeremiah? Something about a weeping prophet. All you do is complain and accuse us. We don't want to hear that. And they didn't want to hear it. They didn't listen, did they? The king himself hated to see Jeremiah coming. Why? Because if anybody defined God's watchman at that moment in time, it was Jeremiah, wasn't it? Daniel was God's watchman in the palace in Babylon. Remember, they chose the young Jewish men that were beautiful, wise, without disease. We don't think of that as being a big deal today, but that was very big, important to them then. Daniel became that wise one in the palace. And Ezekiel was God's watchman among the people by the river Chebar. Where is Chebar? It's a little small. I'm not sure you can actually see that. But if you look up here at the very bottom, you'll see a little city. This is Babylon. Can everybody see that? This is the Euphrates River right here. This is Chebar right up here, just a little bit upriver. Chebar had a river coming into the Euphrates, a river or a canal. We're not sure exactly which it was. But that would have been where he was at this time. So he was away from the government centers, in among the people who were exiled there. And that was Ezekiel. Ezekiel chapter 3, verse 18. I say to the wicked, you shall surely die, and you give him no warning. Not speak to warn the wicked from the wicked way in order to save his life. Why do we say this? Why do we warn the wicked? To save their lives. That wicked person will die for his iniquity. Now, you notice I bold-faced that and underlined it. Why? Because it's going to come up again. His blood, however, I will require at your hand. Why? Because I gave the word to you to give to him. If you did not warn him, then his blood is going to be coming on your hands. Verse 19. But if you warn the wicked, and he does not turn from his wickedness, or from his wicked way, he shall die for his iniquity. Now wait a minute. He dies for his iniquity if you don't warn him. He dies for his iniquity if you do warn him. You get the idea that God's judgment is sure? It's pretty well confirmed. It's pretty well established. Absolutely. But here's the difference. But since you did warn him, you will have delivered your soul. Now wait a minute. Why is it my fault if he does or does not listen to the warning of God? It just is. Nobody likes a watchman, right? But man, with stakes this high, do we have any choice? A watchman is for our own good, isn't he? When he's giving a message from God, a warning from God, it's for our good. Verse 21, If you warn the righteous person not to sin, and he does not sin, he shall surely live, because he took warning. And you will have delivered your soul. God puts this on the watchman, doesn't it? He says, you warn the righteous one, you warn the unrighteous one. It makes no difference. You warn them all. When the righteous one responds appropriately and does not sin, not only will he not die, but you will not die either. Now that puts a pretty strong imperative on us, doesn't it? Your living soul is to be delivered. That's a direct translation, actually, one of the amplified ones. Snatched away is kind of the concept here. Your soul will be snatched. Remember James where he says, we will snatch them out of the fire? It's the same concept. We're saving souls, our own, snatching them away from being burned. All right, it seems there is much more to this watchman gig than meets the eye, doesn't it? I thought it was just a preacher warning in the pulpit. No. I thought it was just somebody talking to you personally saying, hey, brother, I have something against you. No, it's a lot more than that, isn't it? Because when it's all said and done, you will have delivered yourself from death as well. You'll have delivered your soul. My soul depends on my giving warning from God. Well, can't we kind of slough that off onto somebody else? I mean, after all, we are living in America in the 21st century, aren't we? This is old-fashioned stuff here, isn't it? Doesn't apply to us anymore, does it? James chapter 5. My brothers, if any among you wander from the truth and someone brings him back, let him know that whoever brings back a sinner from his wandering way will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins. We save each other when we do this, don't we? How much love do you have for your brethren? The Apostle Paul says, I love my brethren so much I would be willing to die and go to hell in their place. Do you love your brethren that much? To be honest with you, you bozos out there, I'm not so sure. You good people out there, though, I might do that. We're told that in another place, isn't it? For a good person, someone might dare to die. We might die for the really good people, but the rest of you guys out there, I'm not so sure. We got to love each other that much, though, don't we? Do it in the direct translation here, a little expanded view. Brother, if anyone in you has strayed away from the truth, someone may have turned him back around. Absolutely know when he has turned back a sinner from his straying ways, he will save a soul from death and will cover a bundle of sins and offenses. I'm not sure I understand what the bundles of sins and offenses are, but rather the idea of gleaming or enlightening or giving caution. I do understand that, don't I? If I give caution to my brother and he turns around. By the way, what does the word turn around come from? It's a concept of repentance, isn't it? If he repents, then he will save his soul from death, and ours will be saved as well, and will cover a multitude of sins. Now, these are awfully high stakes, aren't they? I was thinking of this when I was first a father, my first born son. Saw him in the crib. This was back in the mid-70s, actually. I thought of the responsibility that had been placed on me by God to have this little baby here. And I thought of the medical responsibilities as well, because medicine was still kind of practicing and playing with this idea of keeping babies alive all the time. Or at least that's the way I thought of it. I thought, man, these doctors don't know what they're talking about. My baby's going to die. Well, no, not necessarily. God made it to where they would live, didn't he? Sometimes they do. But I thought of the awesome responsibility of it. There are awfully high stakes involved in being a parent, aren't there? Awfully high stakes. Well, there's awfully high stakes in being a Christian, too. And this is one of them. We're saving souls from death. We're covering multitudes of sins. We're actually helping. By the way, Watchman does what? All right, we don't have watchmen much in our society, so we kind of think of them as standing on one leg and knocking their hip out like this. No, a watchman would have been put on a high parapet. He would have been looking over a wall out across the countryside, and he would have been more like this, constantly scanning for troublemakers coming. That's what a watchman's supposed to do. He's supposed to lean forward. He's supposed to be on the lookout. He's peering into the distance. And by implication, he's observing whatever is out there. And he's waiting. Can a watchman do anything until an enemy arrives? Can't do anything until they come, can he? When they come, what can he do? Give warning. That's what he's supposed to do. I understand in the Roman army the practice of killing the guard on duty if he was derelict in his duty, did not keep watch, or did not give warning while he was keeping watch. His life was forfeit instantly. He was dead. Not by the enemy, but by his own people. Why? Because he had an obligation to protect them, and he didn't do it. So we have an obligation as well. Verse 7, hear a word from my mouth, and warn them for me. That's what our job is, isn't it? That's what his job was. Ezekiel chapter 33, verse 8, you do not speak to warn the wicked from his way. His blood I require at your hand. Remember Paul's statement? He says, I am free from the blood of all men. You guys remember that? Look it up this afternoon if you don't remember. Look it up. What's he talking about? He has talked about preaching the gospel of Jesus to everyone. Thus, he is free from the blood of those people. Whether they listen or not makes no difference. He has warned them. And that's what it's all about. In verse 8 again, he says, if you warn the wicked to turn from his way, you have delivered your soul as well, because your hands are free, the blood of all men. Isaiah 51, you people who understand goodness should listen to me. You people who follow my teaching should hear the things I say. Don't be afraid of evil people. Don't let their insults upset you. By the way, that's true inside the church as well as outside the church, right? Okay. He wasn't sure he was going to nod yes, but he nodded because I pointed at him. Did you see that? That was pretty good. Manipulation there. Yeah, that's true inside the church or outside. Don't let anybody's insults hurt you. You do the right thing. Acts chapter 20, verse 31. Therefore be alert, remembering that for 3 years I did not cease night or day to admonish everyone with tears. I ceased not to admonish. I never stopped warning. I never stopped telling you. The word warn here is vuthaton, and if you want to know how to spell that, that's the spelling. You'll get that on a Jeopardy question someday, I'm sure. It means to warn. I ceased not to admonish. I ceased not to warn you. That literally is what that word means right there. To warn means to put in mind, remind them of it, in other words. To caution them. To gently reprove. This is a gentle warning we're talking about here. It's not one of those things where we go up to them and, or the one I like best is the one who's got this sandwich sign on the street corner in Times Square in New York City. Repent, end is near. No, it's not that kind of thing. It's a gentle warning of brethren. Even among the brethren, we have to caution each other. For 3 years, a long time. Now, are we supposed to take this literally? Let's take it literally for a moment, okay? Let's impress upon ourselves what the Holy Spirit's impressing upon us here. Night and day for 3 straight years. That means twice a day for 3 years, right? Now, I'm cutting it back to the minimums there. Twice a day, night and day, right? He could have done it all day and all night, as far as I know. Chances are he didn't know. He probably slept sometimes, stopped and ate sometimes, went and rested sometimes. But night and day for 3 years. He warned them. All right, let's look at this. 365 days times 3 years equals 1,095 days. Everybody do your math in your head right quick on that? I went to public school. I had to do it ahead of time. Sorry. All right, twice a day. It's day and night. 2,190 times. 2,190 times Paul warned them. All right, I want you to think about this. Are you warning them? And you ask, well, who? Well, the wicked. Well, I don't know any wicked. Oh, really? If I asked you to pull out a sheet of paper right now and write down 100 people's names that are wicked in your life, how long would it take you to do it? Oh, all right, a dozen. Oh, all right, 5 then. How many wicked people do you know? Wicked as defined by the Bible, not as defined by man. How many would you be able to write down? How fast would you be able to write them down? There's a lot of people I know that are wicked. Am I warning them? There's a lot of people you know that are wicked. Are you warning them? How about we start with warning each other? Don't even go out to the ones outside. Let's just warn each other. That'd be a good start, wouldn't it? Let's consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. Hebrews 10, verse 24 says. Figure it out how to stir each other up to love and good works. You know, my pointing the finger and saying you're not loving enough doesn't do any good, does it? That's not going to stir anybody up unless it's to stir them up against me. But if I want to stir them up to love and good works, what do I need to do to help them with that? Encourage them with that. Now, verse 25 follows that immediately, and this is one we like to go to and kind of pull it out of context and just let it hang there. Not neglecting the meeting together, as is the habit of some. Then we don't really talk about the next phrase. Encouraging one another. And all the more as you see the day drawing near. And by the way, the day is capitalized here, but it's not capitalized in the original Greek. You know why? They didn't have any capital letters at that point. Or actually, the original Greek was all capitals, and they went to minuscule late in the first century. They didn't have a capitalization. It wasn't a proper noun. It was just a day. But what day is he talking about? I've heard people talk about the day of the Lord when it comes. Okay, yeah, that'd be a good reason to encourage someone, wouldn't it? We want to warn them before the Lord actually gets here. It'll be too late then, won't it? Or it could be this day, the meeting together day, when we meet together to take the Lord's Supper on the first day of the week. It could be that as well. Whatever it is, encourage one another, and even more so as you see the day drawing near. By the way, some of your translations will not say encourage here. The other word that is used here is exhort. It's the same word. In the Greek, it's the same word. It means to encourage. When somebody's exhorting someone, they're encouraging. I think of a football coach when I think of exhorting. All right, football coaches may not be the best example. They're not always all that sweet, are they? But their encouragement is always present on the team. They're encouraging their players to do the best they can. Sometimes they're doing it rather harshly, but they're encouraged loudly that they're doing so. Let us stir one another up. And I'm thinking of like a bowl where a cook is using that spoon to stir up the ingredients in that bowl. But we're supposed to be stirring one another up to love. You want a lesson on love? Okay, we'll take about an hour and do that right now. Right? We don't need a lesson on love, do we? We've studied that a lot. We've ignored it a lot. I mean, we've listened to it a lot. The fact is, we know what it means to love. But we still need each other's encouragement, don't we? And, of course, good works. I'm not going to define that for you. We're going to leave that hanging and let you work on that yourself. Because I submit to you that in every one of our lives, each individual Christian will have something different that will be a good work that God requires of them that he may not require of anybody else. Brother Liddell is over here working with the children's home. He has special work that God has placed him to do. That's not work I'm doing. I've done it in the past, but I'm not there now. We all have different things that we are specially talented, specially positioned, specially given by God to do. We're supposed to encourage one another. We're supposed to stir one another up to love and to good works. He says, don't give up on meeting together. You say, well, that's not what mine says. Mine says, don't not meet together. Well, that's what it means. Don't give up on it. Don't think it's not useful to you anymore. Don't think it's not going to help you to be here. I'm not getting anything out of church. You ever hear anybody say that? Oh, by the way, some of you have said that, haven't you? Yeah, okay. Repent, I hope, right? I'm not growing. You ever hear a baby say that to his mom? Mom, you're just not feeding me right. I'm just not growing. Now, in fact, some of us have babies that grew too well, huh? Yeah. They encourage each other. Hopefully, we will never need to do like Nehemiah did. I'm going to take a moment and go through Nehemiah right quick. He had to get the attention of the Israelites when he came out. You know, Nehemiah was the priest who came from Babylon back to Jerusalem to make sure they were building the wall, make sure they were building the temple, make sure they were doing the right thing. And he gets there. I noticed that some of the Jewish men had married women from the countries of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. And we look around and say, so? Half the children from those marriages don't know how to speak the Jewish language. They spoke the language of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. And why wouldn't they? Their mothers spoke that language, right? So I told the men that they were wrong. That might be a good place to start, wouldn't it, guys? If we just started telling people they're wrong, we might have actually the beginning point of being God's watchman to the people today. But oh no, we can't do that, can we? We've got to handle them more gently than that. We've got to not do this with the power of God, but rather with the weakness of man. I told the men that they were wrong. I said bad things to them. I like that. I said bad things to them. I hit some of them. I even pulled out their hair. Now, some of us don't have much hair to pull out anyway, but can you imagine a preacher doing that today? How long would he last? You assaulted our members. No, I assaulted one of the elders. Because that's what Nehemiah was doing. He didn't have any distinguishing characteristics between whom he would or would not assault. He contracted them all. He says, I forced them to make a promise. Okay, I told them they were doing things wrong. I said bad things to them. I pulled their hair out. I pulled out their hair. I forced them to make a promise in God's name. Now, first of all, I would say that a promise that's forced is not really a very good promise, wouldn't you? I kind of get the impression Nehemiah was going to be there to enforce it, though, too, wasn't he? He said, I said to them, you must not marry the daughters of these foreigners. Don't let their daughters marry your sons. Don't let your daughters marry the sons of their foreigners. You know that marriages like this caused Solomon to sin. In all the many nations, there was not a king as great as Solomon. God loved him, made him king over the whole nation of Israel, but even Solomon was made to sin because of foreign women. Now, guys, when you say this, don't forget that word foreign. It wasn't because of women. It was because of foreign women that Solomon sinned. And now we hear that you also are doing this terrible sin. You're not being true to our God. You're marrying foreign women. You are not being true to our God. We've got to say that sometimes, don't we? I told the men that they were wrong. I said bad things to them. I confronted them. We need to confront sometimes too, don't we? I cursed them. I pulled out their hair, and I made them make a promise. You must not marry the daughters of these foreigners, etc., etc., etc. God's watchman is rarely popular. Can you get that idea? We have a prayer meeting once each month, every second Wednesday of the month. Looking out at the audience here, this is a bigger audience than we had this last Wednesday. In fact, it's probably about 10 times bigger than what we had this last Wednesday. I don't need to warn you on that because I can't tell you that it's a sinful thing that would cause you to go to hell instead of going to heaven if you aren't there on Wednesday night. But I just can't conceive of why a Christian would not want to be there. I just can't see that. Sunday night, we have groups that meet. We have 10 to 12, maybe 15 in each group. If you add it all up, it adds up to a lot less than what are here this morning. That's a place where we can go and do this. This is a place where we can go and actually get reinforced, get re-encouraged, get re-established in our faith and our love for God. And we can be better watchmen, and we can respond to watchmen around us because we'll be watching out for each other. Now, I'm not doing this so I can be a watchman and you can say, okay, Haskell gets to check that off on his list. That's not what this is about at all. This is about the love of God in our lives. This is about the love we have for each other. Why would you not warn someone? There's really only one reason, isn't there? Because you don't care. You don't care whether they go to hell or not. You don't care whether they're wrong or not. Look around you and tell me who you do not care about. Well, then if you do care about them, then act like it. That's what we need to do, isn't it? See, a watchman is not popular, but he is oh so necessary. And a watchman is not given a name of a gender. It is a name of a Christian. So let's be that Christian. Would you please come now while we stand and sing if you need to repent and come back to God?